And I said that on purpose: duration, intensity, and frequency. Super hard for a long period of time every day. And somehow that makes me a good trainer because you're so exhausted you can't brush your teeth. That's the ideology that we have to break.
Kind of like the pharmaceutical industry, right? The pharmaceutical industry wants you to be dependent on their pharmaceutical drugs because they make money. They don't want you to have knowledge of eating cleaner or the organic things or the natural healing, right? They want you to take their drugs because that's how they make money. Now,
I'm going to explain to you one of the benefits of finding food items that you identify make you sleepy. There's a tremendous benefit to what those items are. And obviously, if you're eating an apple and an almond butter and you're feeling sleepy, you don't want to be taking that 15 minutes before going to the gate. Gate's laying on the ground and your reaction time is off.
welcome to the Vet Show, episode number 12, part of the Coach Robb podcast network, brought to you by Precision Transport. Coach Robb, this one is all about getting lighter and going faster.
How you doing today, buddy? Thanks so much for carving us in. Yeah, this is a subject that I think all of our listeners are always wondering, hey, if I was a little bit lighter, would I truly be faster? So I'm looking forward to taking this apart and seeing if we can answer some questions on some of the vet writers that have DM'd us and emailed us various questions.
Well, we have 10 golden rules to go through, but we'll set the context before. But Coach, before we do anything, this has become a ritual. It's a habit. What's a habit? Anything over what, 2 or 3 times or 4 times or
Something like that.
I mean, right? Well, it's a habit. We go over whoever was the number of episode we are, and we're on episode 12. So I'm curious to know who number 12 in your mind sticks out.
That's a great question. When I think about number 12, you just hit me up with that. I kind of forgot that. I'm embarrassed to say I forgot about it, but we've got a lot of meat on the bone here on this weight loss. That's kind of where my head was at. When I think 12, I have to go Jim Hawley. I have to go the white Yamaha. I love Jim Hawley as a person. I've never met him. I'd love to. I miss when he and Daniel were on Race Day Live. That was quite the dynamic duo. My first motorcycle was a 78 RM80, so I bleed yellow. So Damon Huffman would be in there. And then Bob Hanna running at, I think it was 88 or 89, riding for Honda, number 12 in the Supercross side. So, and ironically, I actually got to buy Bob Hanna's 1981 YZ125 after he raced it at Daytona. So yeah, so Bob's got a fond spot in my heart. Obviously, he's a badass dude. He takes no garbage. How about yourself? Who comes to mind when you think 12?
Well, I would say Jim Hawley, of course.
Okay. All right.
Jim, and you're right. When Jim and Daniel were on Race Day Live, I'm not certain that combo could be beaten, although I love JB and AC.
Yep.
There was something about Jimmy and DB that was just really good.
Yeah.
Jim Hawley that's a staple for 12 for me. And then I would say Shane McElrath. In Mucklewood. Yeah, I mean, he's the current number 12, right? And you're a little bit older than me, Coach. Not a lot, but a little bit older than me. So you probably have some more fonder memories of the Bob Hannas and whatnot than I do. But 12 in my era is just, there hasn't been anybody, and not to knock Shane because I love
Sure.
Shane, but there hasn't been like anybody like super cool with number 12. You know what I mean? It's not.
Ooh, you just punched me straight in the mouth. You know what I just thought about talking about being super cool on 12?
What?
Villaman, the Cobra.
Oh, DB, yeah.
Oh, shoot. I forgot. I didn't forget, but when you just said a badass dude, and I was just thinking that's when the Yamahas were blue and, well, they still are now, but they just had a completely different look. So yeah, thanks for triggering that in my head, Villaman.
Yeah. I like DV. DV's good. He's a good
But you're right. Since him, though, there's really been nobody that's really put a stamp on 12 like McElrath.
And it's just, I don't know, Coach. I might think I said this about number 11 too. To me, you know how like you have those cool numbers or just those numbers to you that are just cool. 12 and no knock to anybody that's number 12 out there. I know that are 12, but it's just not a cool number to me.
Yeah.
At 633 is probably not a cool number to Mo.
If for people who don't know, that's Dan's personal race number.
So yeah,
that's great.
12 is a good number. Number 13 is next month. So start gearing up for number 13. That one is tricky, right? Because a lot of guys don't take 13 because of superstition. So we'll
Yeah.
have to coach if we can come up with some good 13s for next week.
I've got a personal story I'll share with you on number 13 that I have to own, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with everybody.
Perfect.
Yep.
All right, let's get into it. We're gonna get lighter and go faster. I think that is something that all of us can relate to. There is something about it, coach, and we'll go through these 10 golden rules, but being a little bit leaner and a little bit fit, less pounds does make a difference in some areas. But you can actually go too far.
Mhm.
Talk a little bit about that as well. I wanted to touch on this real quick, coach, because there's two types of listeners that I think the majority of us fall in, right? And that is that we gain weight month over month. Now, whether it's a few ounces here and there, a couple pounds, we gain weight. It's a lot easier to gain weight than it is to lose it, right? Because you actually have to do something. And then there's another group of listeners that have just stabilized. I think I shared this with you before the show. I'm 200 pounds right now, like right at 200 pounds, and I have not wavered for probably the last year. And so I'm static. So I obviously need to do something different to lose the weight, so I don't continue sitting at that static weight, because for me, that is not my ideal target weight. Now, there's another group, coach, that of vet riders that this is going to be, in my opinion, probably a smaller group, right? Because we always talk about how we have so many things going in our lives. We've got jobs, businesses, family. It's tough to eat right and get in the gym and just, but there is a small group of individuals that are at their target weight and they stay there every month. And those are our hardcore guys, and we'll talk about those guys as well. But um, I wanted, before we get into rule number one, coach, I just want to kind of go through some of these benefits that we see on the motorcycle when we're a little bit leaner or at our target weight. That is athletic durability, lower body temperatures, which I want to talk about that. That's interesting. Better performance. Sprint speed is typically better. Our late race endurance is typically better when we're a little bit lighter and at our target weight. And then consistency, and we'll talk about blood sugars and things like that. So I'm really excited to get into it. Are you ready?
Yeah, 100%. And I want to elaborate on what you just mentioned. And I never really thought about it till you just said it. Losing weight takes work, and putting on lean muscle takes work. Stop and think about that. There's some people that might be 130 pounds as a 30-year-old athlete, and their whole life they've struggled to put on weight, right? They go to the gym, they eat a lot of protein, they're doing everything by the book and not putting on the muscle that they want. And I know that for somebody who's trying to lose body fat, they're like, oh, poor you, you can't put on weight. Well, it's the same thing. We recognize that both spectrums have to put a lot of work into it. And I think after today's conversation, these 10 golden rules, well, it'll create clarity for both groups on no matter where you're at in the spectrum. And even if you're somewhere in between in that pendulum, I think people can benefit from it. Everybody wants to be leaner, stronger, and faster. And we want to kind of break. And I'll even go so far as to say this very early in the conversation, though, Dan, the stuff that I'm going to share with you guys, trainers, whatever you determine a trainer to be, whether it's a guy or a girl at the gym as a trainer, so-called motocross trainers, the weight loss industry, the stuff that I'm going to share with you today, they either A, are not aware of it, B, are not knowledgeable about how it really works, or C, they're definitely afraid that you'll learn about it because it breaks your dependency on them. If you followed me for any period of time, I always say I don't want anybody dependent on me. And just to show you where I put my money where my mouth is, every one of our elite clients is on a month-to-month program. Because if I'm letting you down, I want you to have the right to fire me. And if you go month to month, everybody's on giving it their best. If somebody writes me a check for an annual contract, of course, complacency can settle in. You've already got the money in the bank. That's why I like Mitch Payton, right? His big thing is you want to make a lot of money, win races, come to my team, you'll make a lot of money. If you're going to come to my team expecting to get paid a lot of money to maybe do well, don't bother calling Mitch. That's not his MO.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's what applies here at a lot of different levels is the things I'm going to tell you, you bet your bottom dollar, 90% of the trainers out there are going to try to blow a hole in it because they don't want you to know this. And I'm not saying that as a threat. I don't want anybody to be dependent on me, just like I don't want our listeners to be dependent on anybody except their own knowledge base. And that's really, and you and I said this since day one, The vet show is about empowering our listeners with knowledge, and knowledge they can go use tomorrow morning after they listen to this podcast. So that's why I'm really excited about this.
I want to touch on this real quick, Coach. This is going to be a little bit I wouldn't say sensitive, but it might hit home for some. It might ruffle some feathers of others, but you know me, I'm honest, right?
Yep.
Kind of like the pharmaceutical industry, right? The pharmaceutical industry wants you to be dependent on their pharmaceutical drugs because they make money. They don't want you to have knowledge of um, eating cleaner or the organic things or the natural healing, right? They want you to take their drugs because that's how they make money. Now, no, not there is pharmaceuticals where you are dependent on, and that's just it is what it is. There's nothing you could do. And there's a spot for that. Just like your supplements, Coach, right? There's situations where an athlete is dependent upon supplements because there is no other way for them to get them, right? It's kind of like your program. It's kind of like these trainers. A lot of this stuff is so basic, and it doesn't require a whole lot of um, thought, right? It's basic stuff. We got to get back to the Billy basics.
Well, and it's ironic you bring that up because I've been terminated a tremendous amount of times because people said, I hired you to bust my balls. And I don't think that you need any more ball busting. You said it earlier, raising a family, you've got a job or running a business, you've got financial responsibilities, you've got, your interpersonal relationships, you got your professional relationships at school, depending on your age. And now we're going to dump in, this whole idea that we're going to bust your balls by training super hard for a long period of time every day. And I said that on purpose: duration, intensity, and frequency. Super hard for a long period of time every day. And somehow that makes me a good trainer because you're so exhausted you can't brush your teeth. That's the ideology that we have to break. And I say that as adamantly as I can. I'm perfectly fine getting terminated for somebody who wants to be run down and, ground down to a nub. Because yes, there's days that you have to work hard, but you would never take a brand new motorcycle that puts out a tremendous amount of horsepower and then bolt on a rusty chain. I know that's a bad analogy, but that's the way I look at it. Is it's like, sure, I can go over here and talk about one component and make it sound super sophisticated and difficult, but that's not your frustration. The frustration's, no pun intended, the weakest link in the system. And that's the whole idea, whether it's weight loss or whether we're talking about sports psychology or how to lift weights correctly or how to avoid injuries or whatever. There's got to be context that's got to be established. But what's interesting is people will say, your program it's too basic. And I'm like, well, that's interesting because I've had other people quit that said it was too hard of a program because the workload was too much. So then we get into, are you overtrained or are you under recovered? And I don't want that to sound rhetorical, but you got to ask yourself that hard question. When you wake up tomorrow morning and you call me and you say you're tired, is that because you didn't eat, sleep, and drink enough food to offset the load? You could generically replace load with stress at work, at school, your checkbook, in the gym, at home, interpersonal. Was that stress more than what you were able to offset through recovery? That's not overtraining, that's under recovery. Because Dan, to your point, we may have some listeners that are so darn busy, young family, starting a new business, that they literally are not working out. So you can't say that they're overtraining because they'll tell you, I'm not training. I ride 1 day a week as a mental refuge. Well, you can't tell somebody that they're overtraining when they ride moto for, 6-10 minute sessions on a Saturday because they're doing no training. So you see, again, we get into that semantical game. And I do agree with you. When people see the 10 golden rules here, they'll start to see, people are complicating this simplistic, and what's simple, they like to spin it and make it complex. That's why I always like to set the context. And we've got a couple formulas here, whether you like formulas or not. Hopefully, if you're listening to this, you have the ability to take some notes. And if not, when you get to a destination, when you can, because it's very, very basic. But once you understand the formulas, it'll start, a lot of the green lights will go off. Dan, I do want to elaborate before we get started. You made a comment about the pharmaceuticals. I want people to think about this. If you go and you get your blood work drawn and you're deficient in a certain micronutrient, you and I both recognize, and I think our listeners do as well, that requires that you got to eat more foods that contain the ingredient, the micronutrient that's missing from your blood. Makes sense, right? Well, think about what happens when you get diagnosed, and we've talked about this before. Cells make up tissue, tissue makes up organs, series of organs make up a system. Once your system is diseased, then what do they give you? A drug. Now stop, hit the pause button. The body is in a state of being diseased because it's missing nutrient foundations. So what do? They give you a drug, and what people don't realize is the drugs suck even more nutrients out of the bloodstream, sucks more nutrients out of the blood, out of the bone. So now you have weaker bone, weaker muscles, weaker tendons and ligaments that create another injury that they tell you needs another drug. Now, I'm not anti-drugs. I'm right here is proof of my pudding, right? This is a statin because of my heart attack. And I talk to my cardiologist all the time. I'm like, how long do I have to be on these? And he walks through why and trying to make sure that the heart doesn't reject the stent and stuff like that. Like you said earlier, Dan, we're not saying we're anti-pharmaceutical. There's a time and a place.
Yep.
But not when it's about masking the first problem by compounding it with a second and then a third. And now you've got, not to insult anyone's math, 3 variables, 3 to the third power is 27 different combinations. So as soon as you start getting into 3 medications, you have 27 different combos on what could be causing why you feel so bad. And that's, like you say, that's a very difficult place to be. So interesting you brought that up.
Let's give them 10 golden rules. These are just as easy as taking Ozempic, but require more work.
Absolutely.
Well, effort, a little effort.
Well, anybody who's listening to this podcast is all about accountability and responsibility. If you're qualifying for World Vets, if you're trying to qualify for Loretta's, if you want to go to AZ Open, Cal Classic, Mini Hose, that, to be fast there and do well, especially on those West Coasts where you could be lining up on the gate with 5 ex-pros, if not 10. The first thing that we want to take a look at when we're looking at the first golden rule is documentation. Now, when we look at documentation, and several times during today's podcast, I'm going to refer you over to Coach Robb. It's with 2 B's, coachrobb.com, and go to our resource page. It's free. I'm not asking you to pay for anything. None of our conversation points are sales pitches. I have a spreadsheet over there where I want you to go and fill it out for 4 days, preferably 2 days during the week and then the weekend. So go Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or do Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, because you eat a little bit different. Here's why I want you to do the spreadsheet. It gives you the opportunity to document what time, what did you eat, approximately how much did you eat, and the most important part is how did your body respond to it? This is very important. When you eat something, I always want you to evaluate how you feel 15 to 20 minutes later. Do you have really good mental clarity? Are your energy levels super high? Good mental awareness? Or do you have are you mentally foggy? Are you falling asleep at your desk? If you're in a workout, you find yourself yawning and feel like you want to take a nap instead of working out. And the first note that I want the listeners to take down is what that's helping us identify is food sensitivities. No matter what software you're using, we're going to talk about MyFitnessPal by Under Armour. Fantastic resource. It's a digital resource that interacts with Garmin. It's a fantastic resource. Unfortunately, there's no place in it for you to know or denote, if I eat this, it makes me feel sluggish. So that's why I always ask our athletes and anybody who's thinking about working with us, always document what you're eating. But there's 3 things I want you to pay attention to. Number 1, what time are you eating? The second thing is approximately how much are you eating? And as we said earlier, once we look at what you've eaten, how does your body respond to it? Now, here's where the spreadsheet, and I'm old-fashioned, but you'll see, hopefully for the listeners, they'll stick with us. The reason why I like the spreadsheet is once you put it all in, I like you to hit print, and you have 4 days of spreadsheets. Get out the old-fashioned highlighter, and what I want you to do is go through it, and anything that comes out of the center of the store, very easy. If it's in a box, a bag, a can, or a wrapper, you highlight it. And those items are the ones that we want to start getting out of your diet. See how easy nutrition is? Because if it's in a wrapper, it has preservatives, and our bodies are not designed to break down preservatives. You'll notice that when you eat something that has preservatives, you usually end up with some kind of GI distress, diarrhea, feeling nauseous, whatever it may be. So do you see the compound benefits of just documenting? You start to find out what you're eating, what you're eating and at what time, and then you immediately get to see how does it make you feel physically. Now you add a 5th dynamic, and that's the idea that you can identify where's the majority of your food coming from. Now, Dan, did you notice I didn't send you an email Here's 52 weeks of breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks.
Yep.
I don't know what you like. Let's start with what you normally eat. And you'll notice that I never pull out a whipping tool and I don't slap your hand on the, like with a ruler, like when you're back in school, right? The idea is let your food choices tell you how your body responds. That's where the mental energy, the mental clarity and energy levels come out. If you, now that's you can find that at coachrob.com. And I think even if you have MyFitnessPal and a Garmin, you should always do that to find out food sensitivities. And there's going to be a little bit of a caveat at the end of today's podcast. I'm going to explain to you one of the benefits of finding food items that you identify make you sleepy. There's a tremendous benefit to what those items are. And obviously, if you're eating an apple and an almond butter and you're feeling sleepy, you don't want to be taking that 15 minutes before going to the gate. Gate's laying on the ground and your reaction time is off. It's not that you're an idiot. Your food is negatively impacting your reaction time. See the difference?
The perfect snack before bed.
Well, that's exactly where we were going to go with it. When you find something that makes you sleepy, I'll give the little bonus at the end of the conversation based on what you just said right there. If you know that you eat something and it makes you sleepy on those nights when you're really stressed out before the race, you can go back and rely on that. It's healthy and it makes you sleepy. Perfect way to get yourself to sleep early. Now, I mentioned MyFitnessPal, and the reason why I want to kind of circle back around with this is MyFitnessPal interacts with the Garmin, and then this provides a report known as the calories in, calories out report. So documentation is important, but here's a trick that nobody will tell you about. What I'm always interested in is if Dan recognizes that he needs 2,500 calories a day to stay alive, okay? And anybody who's got a Garmin, all you got to do is go and look at your daily calorie burn rate. You see what your calorie burn rate is on average. You just look for the blue number. That doesn't include any physical activity, just the blue. What do you need to stay alive? And then what I want you to do is I want you to come in, and Dan, if this is confusing, let me know because you're the moderator for this to make sure that our listeners get it. If Dan needs 2,500 calories, and those are his basal metabolic needs, how many he needs to stay alive, work with the MyFitnessPal and come up with 4 or 5 breakfast items. So go with me here. Dan does a 3-egg omelet with certain vegetables, a cup of yogurt with some granola, some blackberries, blueberries, and a cup of coffee. You put that in your MyFitnessPal and you say, okay, when I eat breakfast number 1, that's 378 calories. You only have to put it in one time. The next day, you do 3 hard-boiled eggs with some sea salt, extra virgin olive oil. You do some yogurt with some brewer's yeast and some strawberries. You put that in MyFitnessPal and it's 295 calories. Well, you come up with 5 breakfast items and then you come up with 5 or 6 snack items. Well, now Dan knows I need to eat, bear with me here, I'm sorry. I want you to have enough options through breakfast and a variety of snacks that's going to give you about 1,500 calories a day. Because we're all creatures of habit, right? So if you eat one of these 5 breakfast items and then you eat 3 or 4 of these snack items during the day, Dan knows that he's going to hit 1,500 calories by the time he gets home for dinner. Therefore, he never undereats. And we're going to talk about it here in a second, but very rarely does somebody have a problem with overeating. But you see where the MyFitnessPal is tremendous? You get enough knowledge, you could just pretty much say, all right, I know what a 3-egg omelet is 390 calories, and I know that leftover lasagna, and I know that apple with a cheese stick, that's 740 calories, and I've got that in me by 12 o'clock. So now you're able to use the knowledge of that, because I always say use MyFitnessPal to give you at least 50% of your basal caloric needs on a daily basis. Now, what's interesting, Dan, is we've just made it easier for the listeners. A little bit of upfront work, but then the numbers don't change.
Yeah.
It's a win-win for you.
Little tip, coach, that I'll share.
Yeah.
A lot of us are busy. Vet riders are busy, right? Again, we talk about it all the time. We have families, businesses, other responsibilities. Sometimes it's tough to find time to document this stuff. One of the things that I've done is I'll use Siri on my phone. If I eat something, I'll say, "Hey Siri, remind me at 7 p.m. that I ate XYZ, and this is how it made me feel," right? And then when I get home at night or have a moment to sit down, it's documented. It reminds me. I go in, I put it in, and off to the races. So that's something that worked for me.
Absolutely. But like everything, right? I don't want to ask you to document it. I want you to document it knowing how we're going to use it. So it's not a waste of time. You're not doing it once and then never using it again. You're not only putting it in to get the calorie density, you're going to be using it against making sure that you meet 50% of your daily calorie needs. And you can also determine by using the spreadsheet which ones you're highly sensitive to, as well as you start to recognize maybe you're eating more products that come out of a box or a can, or as we call it, the center of the store. It's just awareness. That's all it is. It's not a slapping, we're not slapping you on the wrist. It's just an observation tool.
Golden rule number 2, avoid eating too few of calories.
Yeah,
And
this is a big one.
you alluded to, most of us don't overeat. We actually undereat. And that's one thing that you said before the show, coach. You said, it looks like I'm losing some weight, which I'm not, but I appreciate the compliment. Ed, are you eating enough?
Yep. Well, and this is a big one that the trainers out there, particularly at the gym, and definitely the weight loss industry, does not want you to understand how this works. We're going to define what the yo-yo diet is all about. Think about this. Now, this is where we're going to give you your first formula. It's not complicated. There's 3 little bullet points. And I'll give them to you here separately, but I want to get the context of this set first and foremost. When you go from eating 2,000 calories and you go down to eating 1,500 calories, your body doesn't like it. I don't care what anybody says. I can show you on Garmin. The stress and the byproduct of you cutting 500 calories on a daily basis is perceived as stress by your human body. So, and this is one that I know I'll get a lot of messages on, maybe get some comments below, and that's cool. As long as we can keep it amicable, I'm willing to go through every scenario you could pose at me. When you cut your calories down to 1,500, your body's first reaction is, Dan's starving me. So what does it do? The metabolism will actually slow down to match the calorie intake. This is a preservation mode. This is something that you've been built with. Your body thinks that you just got stranded on an island. It doesn't know you're still living in the comforts of your home. It's asking, why are you cutting me 500 calories a day? You might notice you have a headache. You might notice that you're not able to sleep, right? The body's giving you some external signs and your brain's like, no, we're going to finally stick to a diet. I hate that word diet, but that's what your brain thinks. That's what it's been marketed to. Well, now stop and think about the math. This is where I need you guys to write down 3 little numbers. 1 gram of fat, when it's converted to energy, will yield 9 calories of energy. If your body is thinking it's going to starve, it would much rather burn a gram of fat because it gets twice as much energy than it gets from stored protein or stored sugar. So the other 3 numbers I want you to write down is a gram of fat yields 9 calories of energy. Protein yields 4 calories of energy. And stored sugar, known as glycogen, when it's converted to energy, only yields 4 calories of energy. Now, Dan, pump the brakes. Your body sees that you're cutting calories by 500. It triggers the metabolism to slow down to match the 1,500. And then when you put anything in your mouth, everything that you put in your mouth is going to be converted to stored fat because it knows that when it converts it to energy, it gets twice as much bang for the buck. Now, people go, what does all that mean, Rob? Well, you start a diet at 185, you get down to 180, you get tired of the headaches, you get tired of not being able to sleep, so you go back to the 2,000 calories. Well, now that extra 500 that you've put back in your diet has been converted to stored body fat. So you started at 180, you went down to 175, and now you're 185. That's what's called the yo-yo diet. And this is where the trainers in the weight loss industry love to tell you to cut calories. Why? Because it's easier for them to say, well, because you cut calories, see, you lost the weight. Well, we're going to talk about how that's happening here in a second. But the other side of the equation is you need me to stay at 175 instead of educating people that by starving the body and slowing the metabolism down, guess what? As soon as you put the extra calories back in and the metabolism has been slowed down, you pack on an extra 3 to 4 pounds. Easy, like within a week. And then people get frustrated. They're like, oh, I went from 180, one down to 175, now back up to 185. Well, then do this over and over again, right? You go down to 180, you get tired of it, you go to 190. You go to 190, you come down to 185, you get tired of it, you go to 195. You see why it's called a yo-yo diet?
No.
Down, up, down, up, down, up. So what they want is people to be dependent on them, and that's what we don't want.
You know what's crazy, coach? I was just thinking about this. This is kind of off the wall,
Yeah.
but how God created our bodies and probably the most technically advanced system ever created. And it was like a gazillion years ago. Isn't that just,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah. Well, and we joke about this off the record. You know, you think about our grandparents, especially at my age, right? Soon to be 60 here in the next couple of years. And our grandparents, they literally cooked with pork fat. And yet nowadays, fat is the anti, and I hate to say it, but it's like follow the money. As much as that sounds a little bit coined, it's just so true, right? If we go back to caveman times, you pretty much only worried about eating or not getting eaten by somebody else. That was really, yeah, you could throw in stay warm, not freeze to death, procreate, but your fundamental needs aren't any different today than they were then, except now it's being driven by profit. And I'm a big capitalist. Don't get me the wrong way. I love capitalism, but it goes back to what you said earlier. Nutrition is so simple that people have to find a way to complicate it.
yeah.
I've said it in the show before, and I'll say it again. The way that I expose my athletes to nutrition, the way I expose all my clients to nutrition are the ways that I was taught at the Olympic Training Center. The Olympic Training Center is trying to get the best out of a human being from an athletic standpoint, and they try to do it in a way that's sustainable. I don't know if people think about it this way, but it's definitely worth it for the Olympic Training Center to have Dan stay healthy enough to possibly go through 2 or 3 rounds of Olympics. If you look at all the upfront money to get somebody to the first round of Olympics, trust me, the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, they made a lot of money on Michael Phelps because Michael Phelps went to the Olympics so many times. Every time you get a new batch of athletes in there, you got to think about it's like getting a new rider on a team. It's a lot of R&D. It's much less expensive to keep athletes retained for multiple years. This is why the teams don't have a problem with just paying bonuses only, because the rider's like, well, if I don't ride for bonuses only, I've got to go pay my way everywhere. At least here, I have a chance to possibly win some money. Think about all the R&D money that's gone into those bikes and those riders.
Yeah.
So that's what becomes super important.
Okay. Golden rule number 3, eat every 2 hours. And let me paint the picture, coach, on this, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Like when you eat a lot at one time, right?
Mhm.
Big lunch, and then you don't eat again until dinner time, like, 5, 6, 7 hours, right?
Yep.
Feel kind of like full and sluggish, right? Now, the way that I think about it is it's funny because everybody gives me a little shit at the track because they'll say, dude, you put gas in your bike too much. Put just enough gas in my bike to get me through the moto. Like, I never fill it all the way up because I could feel the extra weight. And it's a difference to me. So I kind of equate this, right? Eating every 2 hours to just putting enough fuel in my bike to get me through the moto because makes me feel better.
Well, this is where there's a lot of hypocrisy that goes on out there because somebody they will enjoy trying to say, Coach Robb's full of garbage. When you eat, you get an insulin spike. And if you can keep the insulin spikes to a minimum, then it's a healthier way of eating. Not true. Because I'm going to elaborate on what you just said. If you wait until you're hungry and we were to prick your finger, you officially have low blood sugar levels. Well, what happens when somebody's hangry? They're so hungry, they're angry. What does their behaviors look like? You probably can name 2 of the 3 right off the top of your head. Number 1, they're going to hit a fast food if they're driving. Number 2, if they're at home, what's the first thing they're going to go to? Do they go to the refrigerator and look for some high quality protein? Or do they go to the pantry and look for something that's in a box, a can, or a wrapper of some sort? They're always going to go to the pantry unless they're disciplined and they're educated. So I like the way that you just kind of said that, because if you look at grazing every couple hours, and I'm not asking you to graze on potato chips and a Coke, I'm asking you to graze on a lean piece of protein, a piece of fruit, and or a piece of vegetable, right? So you put all those together. This is where I think a lot of these trainers, they thrive on being the king of controversy, or excuse me, of being hypocritical. They say you don't want to have insulin spikes. Well, if you wait until you're hungry and then you binge eat, you're going to get a huge insulin spike because the things that you're gravitating towards. And this is something that we're going to talk about here in a little bit, but this is where stress is such a bad thing. And I'm talking about stress in regards to not eating enough food or letting too long of a window go in between, because we tend to overeat. I think all the listeners know this, but there's a time lag between when your brain tells you that you're satisfied and full compared to when you actually are satisfied and full. What I'm saying is that's why we overeat at Thanksgiving. I'm fine. And then that extra mouthful, all of a sudden you feel sick to your stomach because there's a lag. So, and this is what I want people to write down when we're looking at golden rule number 3 is eat every 2 hours with a caveat. Never allow yourself to get hungry. And this is why rule number 2 is important. If you're eating a lot of fat and a lot of protein, those are the only 2 macronutrients that satisfies hunger. So Dan, if I'm not making this crystal clear, I'm relying on you to clarify it. Number 2 was eat more fat, eat more protein, and obviously complement that with good complex carbohydrates, right? Perimeter of the store. What do you find in the perimeter of the store? Your dairy, your vegetables, your meat department, the high quality bakery. It's all in the perimeter of the store. Now, some people argue that a lot of grocery stores don't have a lot of high quality bakery goods. I understand, but go with me here. The perimeter of the store is a much healthier environment than the center of the store. When you look at the idea that protein and fat are the only macronutrients that satisfies hunger, and then we come here about eating every 2 hours, I don't ever want you to wait until you're hungry. It's too late. And then when you do eat, I want you to eat what's naturally low glycemic, fruits, vegetables, and lean protein. So think about when you mix 2-stroke oil, right? If you mix too much oil, you foul a plug. If you mix it too lean, you seize the bite. Well, if you're eating fruits and vegetables and lean protein, you put all that in your belly, think about it as a concentration. The protein and fat's going to bring down the sugar from the fruits and vegetables. And this is why I'm so adamant against people that tell you not to eat fruits and vegetables because it has sugar in it. Unless you've got some very, very bad allergic reaction to a certain fruit or vegetable, the micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals that come in it, that's what your body needs to create energy. This is why your blood work tells us a lot of why would you be deficient in something? Because you got some person who calls himself a professional that's saying, don't eat fruits because they have sugar in them. Well, what about all the nutrients that sits in that vertical of products? And then it's deficient in your blood and you wonder why you have ancillary issues. Well, because your body's missing what it needs to survive. Now, here's where the second formula comes in, Dan. The first one was understanding that a gram of fat yields 9 calories of energy. Stored sugar, glycogen, and protein, when that's converted to energy, they both yield 4 calories of energy. We were talking about the doubling of energy. This is a formula that the trainers do not want you to understand. And this has become very, very popular in the last 15 years. And that's when they beat up on fruits and vegetables. But let me give you a formula, and then I'll explain why trainers don't want you to know this number. And I want you to write it down verbatim. I want you to write 1G of carbohydrates equals 2.5 to 2.8 grams of water. So if you eat 1 gram of carbohydrate, a fruit, a vegetable, a grain, a pasta, your body will naturally retain 2.5 to 2.8 grams of water. So it's very, very clever of these different coaches, training programs, and these weight loss programs when they say to you, we will guarantee you that you'll lose 10 pounds in 1 week. Notice they never use the word 10 pounds of body fat. They say, I will guarantee you 10 pounds of weight loss in 1 week. That's the formula they don't want you to know, because everybody listening to this is smart enough to figure out, reverse the formula. If I don't let you eat carbohydrates, you don't retain water, scales down 10 pounds, I feel like I've just duped you into thinking that I'm smarter than I really am.
Yep.
Now go back to the rule right above it, number 2, right? Yo-yo diet. If I get you to slow your metabolism down, then when you get tired of having headaches and not able to sleep, you're going to go up 5 pounds more than you were before you started my program. So now I can beat you up and go, yeah, see, you can't keep the weight off unless you use me. It's all about me. And that's not what our listeners are all about. They're all about accountability and responsibility. And this is where, if you're taking notes, I want you, because the rest of our conversation here today is going to be geared towards the rest of this entire concept. And that is the idea that if you never allow yourself to get hungry, what is it you're grazing on that doesn't allow you to get hungry? Fruits, vegetables, and lean protein. What are they high in? Vitamins, minerals, and high quality amino acids. So your appetite is going to be satisfied and the nutrient density is going to be there, and you're eating before you become hungry, which keeps you from overeating. See, that's the other part that's so funny, because what is it the trainers like to say? You eat too much. Well, you said it yourself. My experience has been most athletes don't eat enough. And this is why documentation on your Garmin has been a big eye opener for a lot of people. Because if you look at the fact that you're burning 2,500 calories, and when you look at, I always use the bag of Salad Express that you get at your grocery store. That entire bag is 75 calories. An extra large egg is 75 calories. So when you start looking at the need to consume 42 to 52 eggs, just when you look at that, if you and I were going to go riding, Dan, you'd walk up and you'd have 2 5-gallon pails of race fuel. People can visually see volume of fuel. If you take your Garmin calorie burn rate and you divide that by 75 and imagine that's 52 extra large eggs sitting on your counter, and that's a visual that's the equivalent of how many calories you're going to burn today for us to go out and ride 320s. All of a sudden people look at food differently, but here's what's very difficult. Fruits, vegetables, and lean protein, they don't have a lot of calories. So it's healthy, but it doesn't have a lot of calorie density. And this is why I'm so adamant when I get people to start documenting, they go, holy cow, I didn't realize I was missing my calories by so much. Well, when you miss your calories, your metabolism slows down, your burn rate's going up, and that by the body's perception is stress. Now, real quick, because I get this question quite often. Hey, Rob, what about, do you have any suggestions for smoothies and snacks? And this isn't a sales pitch, but if you want some ideas, I've got several books on the Coach Robb store, again, with 2 B's, coachrobbstore.com. I'm not trying to sell anybody on it. The reason why I only bring those up here right now is it gives you an idea of what you want to eat, which then if you reverse engineer it becomes a shopping list because it has all the ingredients. And then when you put all those into MyFitnessPal, you can literally look at the blueberry blast smoothie. When you put it in your MyFitnessPal, depending on how many ounces, you know what the calorie density, how many grams of carbs, protein, and fat. You commit that to memory. When you're looking for calories that are quick and easy, now you know how many come out of that smoothie, out of that snack, that leftover from last night's dinner. So, and again, all of that can be found on coachrobbstore.com.
Coach, I'm going to sell this. I know you don't like to sell things, but I'm going to sell this because I can relate to these vet riders.
Okay.
We don't have time to research what we should be eating. Guys, invest. It's a tiny investment to get the cookbooks, to get all the recipes. It takes the guesswork out of it. It has helped me immensely because, again, that's something so basic, but time. We need time.
Yeah.
And that takes all the time and effort out of it. CoachRobbStore.com. Get your guys, get some of those cookbooks and those snack suggestions. Coach, number 4, golden rule number 4.
Well, this is a brutal one. Yeah, this is a brutal one because none of us that are listening to this are immune to it. Rule number 4 is managing stress if you want to properly manage your body fat percentages. And that's where I want you to go back, and we'll talk a little bit more about it on 5, but go back to the previous, what we just say. If I'm guaranteeing you 10 pounds lighter, there's a difference between guaranteeing 10 pounds of body fat, which by the way takes about 3 months legitimately, versus 10 pounds of dehydration. Because there's nothing worse for an athlete than to be dehydrated because you're going to overheat, your muscles can't slide and glide, and you're going to be working harder to go fast, right? But it's a very easy one for people to say, well, I can get the weight off of you. Well, they just tell you to, especially with the new paleo and all these other, I'm not going to go down the different programs that are out there, but it just is very sexy right now to tell people not to eat fruits and vegetables. Well, yeah, that's how they can guarantee you weight loss. You guys now know it's dehydration. When we look at this golden rule number 4, when you strip the body of a nutrient, I want you to now replace the word strip with stress. If I'm not getting enough B vitamins, those are your energy vitamins. How do you expect the body to create energy when it doesn't have the nutrients it needs to create energy? Right? So this is where I want to make sure that everybody, we are going to go to science class here for a moment. I'm going to give this to you in stages, and I want you to write them down because we're going to come back to them. They're not extensive, but I want to show you how it all works. And the next 5 after this get simpler and simpler, but they're all predicated off these first 4. When you're under stress, now for anybody who has followed Dan and I for any period of time, we always say there's 4 quadrants of life. You have your personal, You have your professional. If you're a younger athlete, you might have school, or if you're a dad or somebody who has a younger athlete, school. You have the you have the financial side of things, and then you have the athletic side of things. But on a given day's basis, every single day, your body's adapting to stress in one or all of those categories at one time. So what happens is the alarm goes off in the morning. There's your first fight or flight. You go through traffic, more fight or flight. You get to the office, you hate your boss, you hate your colleagues, more fight or flight. In and out of meetings, pressure, deadlines, budgets. Got to get to practice, got to get to the track, got to go buy some parts, got to get the bike worked on, work till midnight, right? You see where this is just constant stress, Dan?
Yep.
And this is where our athletes don't realize you've invoked what's called the fight or flight, which is nothing more, it's just part of when you engage your sympathetic nervous system. Think about that as fight or flight. Now, here's where people are going to hear buzzwords that they're familiar with, but again, nobody gives them the context. I always like to use the idea of a fuel injector. When your body's under a boatload of stress, your body is releasing cortisol and adrenaline. I want you to really hang your hat on cortisol, Dan, because what ends up happening is, and this is not an excuse for any one of you guys, but I do want you to understand the science. Whenever the body is under fight or flight, the adrenal system is going to release cortisol. Cortisol makes you want to eat simple sugars. It's not a behavior problem. It is a physiological response to stress. So what do you see about people, first responders, police officers, doctors, nurses? Every time someone walks through that door of the hospital, is anybody bringing them a cup of coffee and a back rub? No. It's catastrophic issues, solve the problem. What are we doing? It's all everybody's hands on, right? Well, now what ends up happening, cortisol levels go up, and now your desire to eat junk food, particularly high glycemic type items like crackers, cookies, that type of stuff.
How about
now we're back to
Coach? Is gummy bears on that list?
Gummy bears right in the dead center of it. It's bullseye. Now, all joking aside, where do you find gummy bears? You don't find them in the perimeter of the store. Where do you find them? Middle of the store.
Oh, Coach, I could tell you where to find them. That's my weakness, but we won't go there.
That's okay. Well, and isn't it interesting if you just look at the notes that you wrote down, right? We have pros in our sport that are under the influence of adrenal fatigue. That's interesting. Adrenal fatigue from what? Well, a lot of the factory teams have their riders on limited calories. Interesting. Some consistency. Well, when you don't get enough calories, it negatively impacts sleep. So your body never gets a chance to recover. Then you just keep reversing this cycle backwards. The end result is you have adrenal fatigue. You're craving simple sugars because the adrenals can't keep up anymore as they try to deal with the stresses of life, sympathetic systems being engaged. I don't want this to be complicated, but I do want to make sure that after today's podcast, everybody has a flow chart in their brain. You're not being weak when you're craving chips and crackers when you're in a very stressful environment, because what's happening? The body, particularly the adrenals, are releasing cortisol and adrenaline. And that makes you want to eat more sugar. So what's the key to getting rid of sugar cravings? Reduce stress. Now go to the next one up. Make sure you don't create stress by insufficient calorie intake, and then go back up. You see how that's why you can almost think about these golden rules as dominoes. Everybody wants to be leaner, have a low percentage of body fat, but if the first 8 dominoes, it doesn't matter what you want at domino 9 and 10, it's never going to manifest itself because you're arguing with the principles of physiology. This is why I'm saying most trainers out there do not even understand, and I would challenge you on this. If you want to put it to the test, ask your trainer, what is the hierarchy of needs as it relates to food and sleep? The answer to that is you will never sleep unless you satisfy hunger. Well, you have it in your notes today. Fat and protein are the only macronutrients that satisfies hunger. If you can satisfy hunger, you'll improve your quality of sleep. And when you improve your quality of sleep, you release more HGH and testosterone, human growth hormone and testosterone. But if you go to bed hungry, the hierarchy of needs is I'd rather be fed than go to bed. That's why you have bad sleep scores.
Yep.
And again, Dan, if I'm going too fast, let me know. That's why I wanted to put the precursor out there earlier. Hey, you're going to have to write the 1 gram equals 2.5 to 2.8 grams of water retention. So don't let them sell you on this ideology that they're going to lose 10 pounds in a week. We're going to talk about what that magical number is here in a moment. Don't let them dupe you into the idea that cutting calories is the greatest, quickest way to lose body fat. It's not true, because it increases cortisol, which then increases your craving for sugars, which now you actually start packing on body fat. I mean, let's face it, Dan, how many people do you know are on a diet and they end up gaining weight, not losing weight?
A lot.
Yeah, like 99.9%.
And they're miserable.
Yes, and they're miserable on top of everything else.
Coach, let's get to number 5, and
Yes, sir.
we're gonna jam through these next 5 because they're fairly simple and basic.
Yep.
Number 5, focus on your composition and your body weight. And I think
Yes.
one of the things on this one here is, one of the notes I have is take your body measurements every 4 to 6 weeks. One of the things, Coach, that I wanted to ask you is, I know you recommend 6 weeks. Is that for like a vet guy, right? Because, um, let's be honest, right? We tend to get frustrated, right? If we're measuring if I'm going to measure my body next week, I'm not going to see a massive difference. It's going to cause me to get frustrated with myself, or think, oh man, all the work I did that week, it doesn't work. That 6 week, is that best for vet riders to see the difference? And why do you recommend that, I guess?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Dan, because what we're looking at is, think about how many trials and tribulations our listeners go through over a 6-week period, right? You add a week, you drop a week. So if you're looking at January through the middle of February, or you're looking at March through the middle of, April, you've got a lot of highs and lows. So that I always like to say 6 weeks is a realistic factor for us to take into all the trials and tribulations that our listeners are dealing with on a regular basis. The reason why, when we get to golden rule number 5, is I want you to be on the scale for completely different reasons than what your trainer wants you on the scale for. Now, again, this is going to take a little bit of documentation, and it won't take us more than 15 seconds to go through it. It's very simple. If you want to know if you're decreasing body fat, tape measures and calipers are the only numbers that matter. And once again, you can get that on our resource page at coachrob.com for free. Spend the $12, buy the plastic calipers, buy a tape measure like a hemming, to hem clothes. And every 4 to 6 weeks, take your body composition measurements, see how much they've changed. The only reason why I want you to step on the scale, and I want you to do it first thing in the morning with an empty bladder, and I want you to step on the scale right before you go to bed after emptying your bladder once again. As a general rule of thumb, you should always be heavier by 3, preferably 5 pounds at night. That tells us that you're hydrated. Please make that note. You should always be heavier by 3 to 5 pounds at night. That validates that you're hydrated. And then I want you to compare morning to morning for inflammation numbers. This is very, very, very important. Dan, if you go back very early, remember how we said I want you to keep a spreadsheet? And I wanted you to give me some kind of a feedback on, are you mentally foggy? Are you sluggish? That's a negative reaction to the food that you've eaten. Well, part of that reaction could be inflammation and swelling. You hear this all the time. Somebody had an inflammatory response to gluten. They say that dairy for some people can create an inflammatory response. So if you're keeping your notes very clean, morning over morning is to evaluate inflammation and swelling. It's my job to figure out if it's coming from exercise or food. Morning over evening is to make sure that you're properly hydrated. Because what you'll notice is when you wake up in the morning, you'll usually be about 5 pounds lighter than you were the night before. So if you went to bed at 200, Dan, more than likely you're going to wake up in the morning around 195, 196. You go through the day. Now, this is where it has a ton of self-correcting mechanisms. If you graze on fruits, vegetables, and lean protein, right? The vegetables and the fruits are high in water. So you're kind of pre-hydrating the body with food all day long. We know that you take your body weight in pounds divided by 2, that's how many ounces of water to consume over a 10-hour day. And then if you offset what you lose in the form of sweat, it's very easy to be 5 pounds heavier at night. You go to bed, your body goes through its various functions, you lose it, you wake up tomorrow 5 pounds lighter. That's why we compare morning over morning, should be within a half a pound of each other. And then morning over evening, it should always be 3 to 5 pounds heavier. The only influence, of course, is if you raced or you had a big workout the day before, the breaking down of the muscle, that would be expected. So that's why When we look at number 5, this is so incredibly important. Tape measurements and calipers are the only thing that we worry about in regards to whether or not you're losing body fat versus becoming dehydrated. Big difference. And everybody has this $10 scale from Target. You don't need a fancy one. Just know your numbers. Just know your numbers.
Vet tip, coach, because I know that all my vet riders out there that go, they buy tools from me, dcmxtools.com. They're thinking,
Yep.
and I got calipers and I got a tape measure. It's not the calipers, guys, that you're measuring your shim stacks with for your suspension. And it's not the tape measure that you're measuring your sag with. It's not your Stanley tape measure. Go to Coach Robb's store, get the right stuff. So,
well, we talked about the sweat rate calculator too. That's also at the coachrob.com as well on resources.
Golden rule number 6: train on principles of nutrition and not physiology.
Yeah, this is so incredibly important, and it's very simple. As you bring the heart rate up, you're burning more stored sugar and less percentage of stored fat. And when you bring the heart rate down, you're burning more stored fat and less stored sugar. So if you came to this podcast today wanting to burn body fat, you need to be bringing the percentage of, you need to bring your exercise intensity down. Now, I will argue this again in a very amicable way with anybody. I've seen it literally for 40 years now. People like to start kind of skewing the numbers and saying, well, but what about my total net calories? Well, let me ask you this. If you have a gas tank in your truck and I fill it with water and it doesn't run, why not? Because you have the wrong fuel in the gas tank to do what? For a combustion engine to go. Well, if you're telling me that you want to burn fat, make sure you're burning fat as a fuel source. If you're telling me you're trying to work on your anaerobic threshold or your sprint speed, you need to have certain workouts where, yes, you get to a point where you start burning more and more sugar because you're trying to get your sprint speed up. Now, here's the part where if you just put those two together, right? Try to do 3, preferably 4 workouts a week cardio. Let 3 of them be in heart rate zone 2. I have a heart rate spreadsheet resource, again, coachrob.com. Not sales pitch. These are all free resources. I just don't like people to talk about what needs to be done and then not provide you the resource. That's annoying. And your magic number is to burn 600 calories per day. Okay. Notice I didn't say cut calories. Keep your calorie intake what you're familiar with. Why? Reduces stress on the body. How do we make sure that you boot? And the magic number, we're going to talk more about it, but we'll go there right now. Your magic number is to burn 600 calories a day, 5 days, 6 days a week. Now that could be strength, because if you build lean muscle inside the muscle spindle cells where you leverage stored body fat for fuel, so you want to lift weights to build muscle, and then you want your cardio to be in zone 2 or below, at least 3, and then maybe 1 zone 3 for 1 day a week, with a goal of burning 600 calories a day. So you keep the calorie intake constant, reduces stress, you don't slow the metabolism down, you bring the calorie burn rate up to 600 a day, do that 6 days a week, because Dan, guess what the magical number is? You want to burn 1 pound of fat per week. There's roughly 3,500 calories to a pound of fat. Do the math backwards. 600 calories times 6 days, and you're looking at a pound a week of body fat, not dehydration. And now everybody at this point are experts. You can go serve the rest of the vet community.
Let's move on to this golden rule number 7, and that is stick to real food. Oh my gosh, Coach, I'm getting these.
You're tired.
Yeah, these last ones they're getting me. Stick to real food. Supplement second, and I think that's one's important because what we need is in our food. And if you're not getting it or you can't get it for whatever reason in your food, that's when you supplement. Don't take the supplements first because it will not replace the food.
Well, just, pardon me, just think about the word supplement by definition. It's designed to complement real food. Now, here's where I'm going to sound a little bit hypocritical and even a little bit arrogant, possibly a little bit snide, disrespectful. So I'm going to ask for forgiveness up front. The same people that tell me that you shouldn't cut calories are the same people who are telling me that you should live on supplements. Follow the money. I don't want you dependent on me. Don't slow your metabolism down. So you already have a solution for that. I own a supplement company, and I don't want you to buy supplements until we deem them to be absolutely necessary. And we've already talked about the idea that fruits, vegetables, and lean protein don't contain a lot of calorie density. So and this is the same group of people that like to throw me under the bus, when I publicly say that most people are not eating enough calories, people go, that's bullshit. There's no way. All right, you just contradicted yourself. Fruits and vegetables don't contain a lot of calories. So if you eat out of the perimeter of the store and you're burning 25 to 3,000 calories, there's not enough time in a day for you to get all those calories in. So when I say most people are under eating, do you see what I'm saying? Now you can blow me out of the water if you're eating McDonald's every day and you've got a ton of calories that are all empty, no nutrients value to it. Sure, you can blow me out of the water and say that you're overeating every day. I don't think our listeners have that problem.
Yeah.
That's where these all start to cross germinate with one another. If you focus on the first five, these last five pretty much take care of themselves. Now, if Dan doesn't get enough protein in his diet just because of him being as busy, sure, I've got a high quality whey protein. It's very expensive, but that's because it's 100% whey protein, no colors, no fillers. But I'm not advocating whey protein shakes, and I've got a smoothie cookbook. I'm not even advocating the whey protein in your smoothie over high quality foods. So that's why number 7 is so important.
Coach, I'll take number 8 if you don't mind.
Yep.
Number 8 is avoid distractions and chew your food. I am extremely terrible with this because I like to multitask on my phone as I eat, and it has caused me issues in the past, right? I typically don't chew my food enough. It has given me digestion problems, and I kind of need to focus on chewing, as weird as that sounds. But um,
Well,
yep,
just take the test, go to the restaurant and watch the table beside you. It's kind of gross. The average person never puts their fork down, and it's put it in, they'll literally bite, chew twice maybe, and watch them gulp. Now you've got these clumplets of food that go into your stomach, and then you wonder why you have digestive issues and you need antacids and all this other. Literally put the fork down in between, converse with somebody. It's another little trick. Try not to eat by yourself because we have a tendency to shovel.
yep, yep.
If you're talking with somebody, it slows it down a little bit.
Rule number 9, and that is your goal should be 1 pound a week. I think you touched on that,
Yep.
Coach. 3,500 calories.
But here's the key. We're not telling you to burn 1 pound a week. Understand how to burn it. Make sure that you're doing 600 calories a day of low intensity, leveraging stored body fat, not cutting calories. This is what the trainers want you dependent on them. See me tomorrow at 6 a.m. and I'm going to bust your balls on the treadmill, the rower, the standing erg. The ski erg and the rower are fantastic when they're used at the right intensities.
Yep.
Because remember, the workout can cross into becoming too stressful, which now the parasympathetic, sympathetic system's got to kick in, fight or flight, because it sees it as stress because you didn't sleep enough and you're on a calorically restricted diet and you wonder why you're not losing body fat.
Number 10, Coach. This is the last one. This one is probably the most important to me, and I think it should be the most important to all the listeners, and that is a reward system. You have to find whatever that is going to be for you, right? You have, whether it's getting first place at the Vet Worlds at Glen Helen, or if it's qualifying for Mammoth, or if it's being on the podium at your local series, or even if you break it down even further than that. For me, Coach, like, I needed something when I'm hardcore, when I'm training and I'm training for something specific and I'm hardcore, Sundays was my quote unquote cheat day.
Okay.
When I say that, right, it wasn't like, if I eat clean through the whole week, I drank nothing but water. Like Sunday, I would go to Chipotle and I would have a burrito bowl. And you know me, Coach, I love Coca-Cola, right?
Yeah, me too. I'm right there with you, brother.
I would have a Coke, right?
Yep.
That was my cheat day. It wasn't like I'm going and pigging out, right? But the listener or the rider, vet rider, needs to find whatever that reward system for them is going to be. And I think, Coach, and correct me if I'm wrong, we can't decide that, right?
Right.
Decide what that is. They have to.
Well, the simplest example, and I've used this previously, is think about what the currency is for your children. There was a time when you and I thought M&Ms were more valuable than money. Then there were times, having access to the keys to the car so you could go on date night and go to the movies, right? It wasn't like your currency changes as we get older. But if you're remember we opened up today's conversation with the idea that we have two groups of people. You have somebody who struggled with their weight, up and down, up and down, and up and down. And after today's webinar, hopefully they have a better understanding as to why that's happening and why it's designed to dupe them. So hopefully they're going to correct that. But how many times have you hit the certain scale weight? How many times have you hit a certain size of pans? And you get there and all you can hear the music in the background is going, wah, 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 right? It's like been there, done that. And that's why I like to, like in our general fitness and weight loss division, sign up for a 5K because training for the 5K, that's the focus. The weight comes off as a byproduct of training for the 5K. But then when you cross the 5K, you've got an announcer, you've got music, you've got 2,000 other runners, you get a finisher's t-shirt, you get a finisher's medal. And this isn't everybody gets a trophy. It's that journey got the weight off and there was a sense of accomplishment that was new and different. My currency could be something as simple as just getting, getting on the Harley and going around the lake for Michaela and I. That's a reward. So it does, like you said, it's very, very specific. It doesn't have to cost money. It could just be, hey, maybe this does cost money, but maybe there's a new album, or I'm showing my age here. There's an album that you want to download, and your favorite music group's got a new album that's out, and you say, hey, look, if I hit this and when I hit this, then I'm going to download that music. That could be my music's my jam. I love it. And everybody's got their currency, but if you take all these 10, Dan, and you kind of surmise them, right? Here's the little bonus thought that I want people to understand. You need to make sure that you're testing and validating that you're lighter, which is the title of our podcast here today. Lighter will make you faster until it doesn't. And we see this quite a bit, like with our Olympic athletes and stuff like that. You can get to a point where you get so light that you lose raw power, you lose muscular endurance. And this is why we talked about earlier, making sure that you evaluate things on a 4 to 6 week cadence. It's not just on the body measurements, it's also on testing, because you don't want to be going at something headlong for 6 or 8 months and realize 4 months ago you started going backwards, but you had no benchmark. And you could end up, you're putting all this effort in and going, dadgum, I'm lighter, but now I'm getting beat by somebody I'd never been beat before, or my riding buddies are able to ride longer than I can now. Well, just back the train up. And I'm going to say something that's going to rub people the wrong way. Don't get so caught up on what the weight is. Go by how you feel on the bike. And that's what you opened today's conversation with, right? What's the goal? For me, for all the listeners, is I want athletic durability, Dan. Unfortunately, we hit the ground. That's part of our game. Well, I want to make sure, because if we reverse engineer, what would make a bone brittle? What would make a tendon, a ligament, or a muscle not as resilient to impact injuries? Not enough food, not enough sleep, too much chronic stress in the body. It literally weakens you from the inside out. So every day that you can go out and ride and you hit the ground and you get back up, it proves to me that you're more durable. The more times you get up, the more you ride. Now we have athletic maturity. This is really important for your young athletes. Now, you were surprised by the lower core body temperature, right? Where you've got the skin, you have body fat, fascia, and the muscle. Well, that body fat is just an insulation blanket. So as that body fat percentage goes down, you're able to wick away heat that much easier. So now you're going to actually have a lower calorie burn rate because it takes less effort to go fast. Good news is it's easier to maintain it. So now we get late race endurance is being facilitated by being lighter. You have less internal heat, so you have less heat stress, so you can go faster, longer, all because of the top 10 things that we just talked about. Does that make sense at any level?
It's so wild how just all this ties back in to one another, right? And it's all kind of woven, and it's so simple. It really
But
is.
that's what I want for the listener. And if our listeners, if they can go away from this hour show and they just go, okay, Robb told me there's going to be a little bit of science, there's going to be a little bit of documentation, a few formulas. This is what the weight loss industry and the training community doesn't want me to know. And now you're a student of it. Now go spread the news to other people. And I mean that as sincerely as I can, because you should never be dependent on anyone for anything. That's why that one golden rule is make sure that you don't try to argue with the principles of nutrition and physiology, because we will lose 100% of the time. Remember how I've said to you, and I've said it to all of our listeners, if I drop a pen, the law of gravity guarantees it's going to hit the ground. Well, why would I argue when somebody wants to go out there and I'm going to make it about me. Screw you, Dan. I'm going to make it about me. I'm the trainer. No fruits. And then you get a bloodborne disease because you're so chronically deficient in a micronutrient. Now, I disappear into the sunset. That's your problem, dude.
Yeah.
You listened. You've got a disease. It's not my ball. You own it. Well, that's where, to me, I have a problem with the lack of accountability. Because if I ever did that to any of my athletes, and we have checks and balances to make sure it doesn't happen, our clients are required to get blood work done once to 4 times a year. Not because I need to be proven right. I don't want anybody to get sick. If you're listening to this podcast, your intentions are good. You're taking an active role and responsibility. It's my job to help you. Why even get blood work, Rob? It's going to help us find deficiencies. Well, what matters if I have a deficiency? Because we don't want the system to become diseased. If you're one of these pros and they've been diagnosed with Epstein-Barr, Addison's, any of these fatigue-related diseases, where are the trainers that were the so-called experts that ran these athletes into the ground to allow that to happen? That's where I want someone's neck on the chopping block. And I don't want that for our listeners because they have young families like yourself running a business and having a young family. Come on, man. And I'm not Mr. Goody Two Shoes. I don't want to give that impression. It's just, I want to get on the top of every mountain and scream, fatigue related diseases are 100% avoidable.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the crazy part.
That's pretty basic stuff. Coach, thank you so much for today. Thanks to all.
Absolutely.
Just a little preview teaser of what next month looks like. We're going to talk about some of the mistakes. There's 4 very common mistakes that lead to burnout and injury. So
absolutely,
you're a great one. Again, you thank our listeners. Thank you, Precision Transport. If you guys are looking for someone to transport one motorcycle or a truck full of any type of goods, hit up Precision Transport. Make sure you guys like and share. Tell grandma that you're listening to the Coach Robb Vet Show. Tell all your friends. Like and subscribe. Leave comments. Send us Instagram messages. We love it all. So thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next one.
Peace.